Give me the link for the Elon talks.
What are the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that there is accountability and transparency?
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, our actions, we post our actions to the Doge handle on X and to the Doge website. So all of our actions are maximally transparent. In fact, I don't think there's
totally.
been...
Virtually everything that they've tackled in terms of like combating weird spending habits or whatever are just things that the government spends money on that sounds stupid or is against like the Republican agenda, right? Or even if it's not something against the Republican agenda, the broader Republican agenda, they present it as though it is, right? They'll say like, oh, we're giving condoms to Hamas. That's like a great example of this, right? When that's not the case. Like, you're not going to be able to put a dent in American government spending that way when you're finding like $200,000 or $46,000 that was spent on one thing or $200,000 that was spent on another thing. The American government is major. It's massive. It's incredibly costly. And doing this in the stupidest ways possible without actually hiring regulators, ironically, that understand what these programs are, like with proper audits, with proper auditors, and trying to undermine it across the board is, of course, leading to all of these issues that you have seen so far with like mass layoffs or the threat of mass layoffs that don't make any sense whatsoever. Dude got checked by the judicial branch and called it a coup. Checks and balances don't exist with this guy. That's what I mean. And the last line of defense that barely exists now is the judicial branch saying, yeah, you can't just decide to lay off the entirety of the federal government labor force. Like, you can't do that. These are tens of thousands of people that rely on a paycheck from the government. That's so stupid.
And we're talking about billions of dollars that we've already found. We found fraud and abuse. I would say those two words as opposed to the third word that I usually use.
No, the condom story wasn't just condoms, and it wasn't.
Abuse.
It was Mozambique,
it's abusive because
and it wasn't just condoms.
Things are
it was a broader anti-HIV. It was a broader HIV prevention initiative that exists in Africa.
But we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that we've already found, and now a judge who's an activist judge wants to try and stop us from doing this. Why? Why would they want to do that? I campaigned on this. I campaigned on the fact that I said government is
Mozambique,
corrupt.
Gaza.
And it is very corrupt.
Is it actually
It's
fraud, though?
very,
No,
very,
it's not. That's
also,
the problem. You can't just declare something to be a fraud because you don't personally like it, okay? The simplest example is contraceptives. Let's say that there's enough people within the Republican government that consider contraceptives to be unchristian-like. And there are plenty of people who think contraceptives are unchristian-like. You can't just say, oh, it's fraudulent to spend these pre-allocated funds on contraceptive programs in Africa in an effort to combat sexually transmitted diseases. Just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it's fraud. It's ridiculous. This whole Musk purge is built upon a rhetorical sleight of hand that everything is everything I ideologically disagree with because it's woke and gay is per se waste, abuse, and fraud. And no one in our media highlights this massive category error that is actually kind of important.
Fraud, abuse, all of this horrible stuff going on. And we've already found billions of dollars, not like a little bit, billions, many billions of dollars. And when you get down to it, it's going to be probably close to $1 trillion. It could be close to $1 trillion that we're going to find.
No, that part is completely ridiculous. You are not cutting $1 trillion worth of government spending, okay? I wish.
We have a case in New York where a hotel has paid $59 million, $59 million because it's housing migrants.
Dude, additionally funny, Trump is saying this because he did this with the Trump hotels when he was president. He literally did this. He did this exact same thing with Trump properties while he was president. He would get Secret Service to stay in his own properties to pay exorbitant fees to his own properties. You will see it. America overspending issue is bad. You will thank future later. Elon, not perfect, but he's smart. Dog, I am not saying that the American government is not wasteful or even engaging in fraudulent activities. I'm simply stating that these guys are not actually tackling that, okay? If they were looking at genuine fraud, they would end up harming a lot of their, important corporate benefactors. So, of course, they're not going to do that. they're not going to go after, for example, the military. Okay. You want to know how I know that they're not going to go after the military and fraudulent extra spending for no reason? Because Donald Trump has already said he's signing off on additional billions of dollars in weapons contracts to the state of Israel, for example. If they wanted to go after fraud and waste, they would not take out the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. How is that taking out fraud? That is an agency tasked with helping consumers and has helped consumers. They've recovered $21 billion of fraudulent and wasteful expenses that these criminal corporations have actually forced upon the American public. For the price point of $1 billion, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has actually given back to the American public $21 billion. You really think they're tackling fraud? Or do you think they're making it easier to steal from the American public? To make it easier for corporations to keep grafting you. Yeah, Trump is moving to reverse medical debt and overdraft protections implemented by the CFPB. Wow, how wonderful for the American public. If only there were more people, and not just like random dumbass Twitch streamers like myself, actively talking about this every time they had an opportunity to talk about this, instead of talking about U.S. aid and how we must defend U.S. aid, and if we don't defend U.S. aid, then China is going to take over. Like, instead of saying like that, maybe they should talk about this. The only other media outlets that I've ever heard this kind of commentary from is myself, Michael from Pennsylvania, Chapo Trap House, TrueAnon, and Majority Report. What is going on? Where is the Democratic Party? This is 100% an abdication of duty, okay? It shouldn't be up to Dropsite News, Majority Report, myself, and some others that are actively saying this is a ridiculous thing that they're doing. It is actually not beneficial for the American public. This is a horrible thing to do, especially when you have someone that is responsive to populist sentiment, okay? It's crazy to me that Hakeem Jeffries is not talking about this every goddamn day, okay? It's crazy to me that the Democratic Party is not going on every news outlet and saying, look at what they're doing. They claim to be on the side of the American public. Instead, they're just showing their bellies, dude. Chuck Schumer also said they're not going to put up a government spending fight as well, which I think is ridiculous. I think they are going to do that, I suspect. That would be insane.
Look, here's the bottom line. The Republicans are already shutting down good chunks of the government.
And no, this isn't hypocrisy baiting, chatter. What are you talking about? This is directly saying that the Republicans are currently actively doing harm to the American public. Do you understand? It's not about like, oh, look at the hypocrites. They said they care about the workers, but here's what they're doing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying communicate that they're harming the workers. This is more than hypocrisy baiting. Hypocrisy baiting is when you say that Trump's border wall is stupid and you're racist for defending it, and then turning around and being like, we are the ones who actually want to build the border wall. Trump doesn't want to build the border wall any longer. That's dumbass hypocrisy baiting. That makes you look like an idiot. That makes you look like you got caught, that Trump was right all along, that immigrants do constitute a national security threat, and that you got caught, and now you're going, oopsie, I guess we want to build the border wall now. Everyone can see that you're the hypocrite in that situation. You're the dumbass in that situation. Saying that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is actually responsible for $21 billion of fraudulent and wasteful and criminal expenditures that the American public had to pay for, the American consumers had to pay for, okay? And then turning around and abolishing that agency being an overall burden, directly talking about medical debt on your credit card, directly talking about overdraft fees, things that every single American can understand, because at a certain point, they have experienced this, okay? They've experienced these problems. They should remind people why they no longer experience some of these problems. It is because of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Same with Lena Khan and all of the initiatives from Lena Khan. Taking out Lena Khan is a massively consequential move. I'm more conservative. Serious question, because I honestly don't know. Are liberals thinking what they are claiming to find in U.S. aid is lies? Liberals are saying that U.S. aid is a profoundly important aspect of American foreign policy that works to continue American dominance by doing soft power initiatives around the globe. Some of those initiatives are actually good for the overall public that receives these initiatives, like, reproductive health care in Africa is good. It's not a bad thing. Okay, even though it is done at the behest of the United States of America doing soft power in these countries, making these countries reliant on the U.S. and making those security cooperation agreements that come later down the line an overall easier one to sell to the broader public. Having said that, however, there is a lot of just insanity in the way that they're targeting things. Like they'll just be like, oh, well, they're giving $40,000 to a Guatemalan transplant. And then you look it up and it's actually like a joint partnership agreement to fund the arts, okay, between a Guatemalan university and an American university. It's like, yeah, that's not fraudulent expenditure. I think a lot of these dummies also personally think that like anything that they're doing in terms of, you know, pro-LGBTQ or whatever is not done at the behest of like later utilizing these existing relationships as a way to destabilize countries, or at least like to have some kind of civil society organization on the ground to develop a better understanding, to do espionage if necessary. But instead, it's just because we're woke, and we're doing this because we're truly woke. It's a way to believe the propaganda that liberals have put forth. It's ironic because that means you genuinely believe that the American government is doing things because they're kind. You have to be a real dumbass to think that the American government is doing things because they're kind. Yeah, the American government is woke and gay. That's why they were doing aid. Ridiculous. They're doing aid so they can eventually utilize the existing relationships that they've developed on the ground for whatever suits their purpose. Also, none of it is fraudulent. As Adam Johnson mentions here, everything I ideologically disagree with because it's woke and gay does not mean it's waste, abuse, and fraud. Do you understand? Oh, well, I don't like this personally, so I think it's stupid and bad, and abuse and fraud is a ridiculous way to do this, okay? Unintelligent person alive. 3, if you're really implying that U.S. aid is not done out of pure goodness of the American heart, then name one thing U.S. did wrong in the last 50 years. I can't name one. There's nothing I can name in general that America has done in the name of good, okay? Even Ukraine is a great example of what I'm talking about. Ukraine is on the right side in terms of morality, okay? Ukraine has an understandable moral position to rid its national borders of a military invasion. America's interest in Ukraine, however, which Trump basically revealed openly, is not so good. That's it. You have to look at the situation and truly believe that America is always doing good things around the world for you to assume that their intentions with Ukraine is good, even if they openly state that their intentions are not pure. Their intentions are impure. It's also short-sighted policy because there's a funding after-school programs for undeserved communities, DEI, and fraud, but the role of that program is to decrease incarceration, saving the state money. For example, it can also be self-serving. Yes, a lot of the initiatives like that, after-school programs and whatnot, seem costly, wasteful, and stupid. Like they'll be like, oh, dude, they're doing violin... they're doing like musical education lessons in the south side of Chicago or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that is an incredibly important initiative. As studies have shown time and time again, after school programs actually significantly lower at-risk youth's likelihood to go and do crimes, okay? They're not doing it because they're woke and gay. They're doing it because it's obviously beneficial. It saves the government more money down the line as well if these kids are not doing crime and then doing crime obviously is chaotic. They're stealing cars and whatever. Or obviously you don't want like property loss in general for the broader public, but it's also better overall for the government now that you don't have to like put a bunch of children in the system at an early age. But that requires you to, one, do a little bit of reading in order to understand these initiatives and the long-term impact of said initiatives. That requires you to imagine an alternative instead of simply closing your eyes and going, nah, dude, I have these racist beliefs that these guys are intrinsically evil and inferior. I won't say that they're inferior because of their race. I'll say they're inferior because of their culture as a substitute for race, and that no amount of violent lessons is going to stop these kids from stealing Kias or whatever, when all evidence points to the exact opposite, that these initiatives are very helpful. Anyway, if only we could get Republicans to think that like the carceral state is woke and gay and incredibly costly. Anyway, here, there was a decent question here in terms of conflict of interest. But if there's a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself, for instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts, is there any sort of accountability, check and balance in place that would provide any transparency to the American people?
There's a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself? For instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts when it comes to the Pentagon, for instance, which the president, I know, has directed you to look into.
Yeah.
Are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Well, all of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. They'll say it immediately,
Including you yourself.
Yes. But transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency, so you can see everything that's going on. And then you can see, am I doing something that benefits one of my companies or not? It's totally obvious.
And if we thought that, we would not let him do that.
No, you wouldn't. No, you are doing that. You literally brought up fraudulent and wasteful spending, talking about how the federal government offered millions of dollars to New York hotels in order to house migrants. That's not wasteful spending. That's the federal government actually trying to fix the crisis caused by Governor Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis by, without informing the local authorities, shipping, kidnapping, and trafficking tens of thousands of migrants from the state of Texas into the state of New York to play political football with people's lives. In that process, the federal government has to step in and say, okay, for the overflow, we have to, in the interim period, we have to make sure that these people are housed. Okay. So what do? They pay hotels to house the migrants. Okay. That is not wasteful spending or fraudulent spending. That's just an understandable thing that the federal government did. You know what is actually fraud? A conflict of interest? When you are the president and you own a bunch of hotels and you actually overcharge the federal government to stay in those hotels during the duration of your presidency, and you make money that way with federal funds. That's actually a conflict of interest. That's actually wasteful spending directly. That is a direct instance of fraud. That's what Donald Trump did. But of course, no one will look at that and go, what the f- are we talking about? Also, you got this. Elon Musk's pushing into the financial services with a Visa deal while immediately after taking out the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's crazy. Source, not doubting you, have just never heard of this till today. Which one do you want to source for? Donald Trump charging the federal government or the thing that he just brought forward? Here, Trump overcharged Secret Service by 300% for accommodations at his hotels. House Oversight Committee's report further called the ex-president's term the world's greatest get-rich-quick scheme. It is such a transparent instance of corruption, too. It's crazy. Also, Donald Trump did a cryptocurrency rug pull, dude. What are we talking about? Elon admits he will tell some lies. Yeah, I mean, he's like, oh, my bad. Yeah, we dominated the media cycle for like 48 hours nonstop. But here's where we're at.
Was $50 million of condoms was sent to Gaza. But after fact-check this, it apparently Gaza in Mozambique, and the program was to protect them against HIV. So can you correct the statements? It wasn't sent to Hamas, actually. It was sent to Mozambique, which makes sense why condoms was sent there.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that all the statements that you said were correct, so we can trust what you say?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I'm not sure that's something Americans would be really excited about.